Why is it always Mandarin versus Cantonese? Is Cantonese the closest to ancient Chinese? Short answer, no. Longer answer, yes, but also not really. It depends on how you look at it. Welcome to this new series that I'm trying out. For now, I'm going to be calling it Make Chinese Make Sense, because these videos will be about things that I research and piece together while I try to make sense of the Chinese language. And in this video, in this first episode of the series, let's look at the history of Chinese and how ancient Chinese transformed into the language that we learn and speak today. When we talk about Chinese, most people just think Mandarin, Cantonese. But as you can see here, there are tons of languages spoken in China. In Chinese, we usually call them by the region name plus hua, which means language. So Shanghainese would be Shanghai Hua. And this is collectively known as Fangyan, which is translated into dialects. But it's not super accurate, and a lot of people get offended or annoyed because it's treating these languages as dialects of Mandarin Chinese, which is not. So some people prefer to use the term topolects or variations, but for the sake of this video, we're not going to be super technical, so let's just call them languages. Here is a map of the different families of languages that are spoken in China. I found this picture on Google, and upon further inspection, it seems that the color code is a bit off, but it's okay, we can make it work. So this giant mass of orange, let's talk about that last. And let's start with the yellow, which is Wuyu. And this is the languages that are spoken in Shanghai, Zhejiang, etc. The dark purple is Ganyu, which is spoken in Jiangxi and surrounding areas. The pink, light purple color is Xiangyu, which is spoken in Hunan. The cyan blue is Cantonese. The reddish color, the salmon pinkish color, is Mingnanyu, or Southern Min. And this is spoken in Fujian and also in Taiwan. So in Western media, what people call Taiwanese is usually actually Southern Min or Hokkien. I think I pronounced that wrong. Oh my god, sorry. So Hokkien or Kejia is the green color here, which is next to the red color. What's interesting is that the people, they were originally from North and Central China, hundreds, thousands of years ago, but because of war and other things, they kept moving around until they reached the south where they are now. So speaking of the North and Central China, let's look at this giant mass of orange now, which is the Guanhua. This literally translates to the language spoken by government officials, aka the definition of Mandarin. It's based off the language of the imperial city, and throughout history, most of the imperial cities of the various Chinese dynasties were all in the north, such as Xi'an in the northwest, and Beijing and Luoyang in the north central-ish parts of China. This is why this language family is sometimes also called Northern Mandarin. And in addition to it being the government language, it also spread this widely because of war, trade, and generally just people moving about, communicating with each other a lot. And it also got some influences from foreigners like the Mongols and maybe the Persians from the Silk Road. So that's also why it evolved pretty drastically, but also at the same time, most of the languages in this family can be mutually understood. Kind of like Latin during the Roman Empire, everyone spoke Latin, and different places had different dialects, which then evolved into different languages, but they're mostly similar. So that's the same with these Guanhua languages. On the other hand, these other language families that we talked about earlier, they were separated geographically by mountains and rivers. So they evolved independently, and they became so different that people like to say if you go to the village down the road, it'll be like you're in a foreign country because you don't know what they're saying and they have no clue what you're talking about either. But no matter the differences, you can still trace everything back to the same origins. So, for example, tea is invented in China, and I remember there was a Tumblr post back in the day where it said whether it's called tea or cha, chai in a language all depended on what part of China the country imported their tea from. But why did different parts of China call it differently? Well, in ancient Chinese, apparently it was pronounced something like dra. I think some ancient Chinese person is rolling in their grave right now at how I just pronounced that, but it was something like dra. And then in most parts of China, the dr sound, it gradually changed from like dr to dr, and then ch, which finally became cha. But in Fujian southern Ming area, instead of changing that dr sound, they just got rid of the and it turned from dra to da, and then de, and then te. And finally the Brits came and turned it into tea. So many of the other differences between the various languages all had similar paths like this. So for example, this character, it means me, myself, I. It was pronounced something like no in ancient Chinese, and I cannot make this like nasally sound, and apparently a lot of people could not do that either. So that's why in like the central area of China they turned it into 我. They just got rid of the nasally sound entirely. And meanwhile in the northwest they also got rid of it, but they kept the N sound, so they turned it into n. When I learned this, I thought it was really cool because in Korean, it's pronounced na. And I don't know how related it is, but in northeast China, it's actually the reverse and it's pronounced an. So you can see like in the north central Guanhua areas, they just got rid of these like nasally sounds, while this was kept in southern languages like Shanghainese, Cantonese, etc. And this is why many people say that the southern languages are closer to ancient Chinese and more authentic, while the northern languages got tainted by the foreigners from the Silk Road. And among the southern languages, people tend to say that Cantonese is the most authentic of all. However, even though these southern languages, they kept some of the most common or prominent characteristics from ancient Chinese, they also had their own changes, adding things, taking things away of their own. And so in my opinion, I think it's important to remember that language has evolved, is evolving, and will always continue to evolve. For example, the Shanghai that is spoken in Shanghai City right now, it's not authentic Shanghai at all. It's actually a mix of the rural Shanghai plus the language of the merchants from Zhejiang who went to Shanghai in the last few centuries for trade. And funny story, a personal anecdote, my aunt, who was featured in my Shanghai vlog, she actually hates the language. And once I asked her why my nephew, her grandson, why he doesn't speak Shanghai, and she's like, I refuse to teach him because I don't think it sounds good, and it's not even real Shanghai at all, so what's the point of learning it? But her parents, my grandparents, they actually moved from Zhejiang to Shanghai back in the day, so they were, you could say they were part of the group of people who created this new Shanghai. And sure, it's not authentic, but it showed like this part of history, and even now, I guess we could say that we are also having a hand in how the modern language is evolving. So the main takeaways for this video, there are a bunch of different Chinese languages. They all evolved from ancient Chinese, but in different ways, and the ways that they changed are all intertwined with history, which is why I love learning languages, not just Chinese, but every language, because when you do dive deep into this language, you can learn so much about the history and culture of the region that the language is spoken in, and that is super cool.